Adding repetitive details or parts to a model can be time-consuming, but we can avoid this in many situations by using vector displacement maps, or VDM brushes for short. Stay tuned if you would like to learn how to make this type of brushes and speed up your workflow. Let's get to it. Hello everyone, I'm Nemesis from Ngo85. Welcome to my channel. This is the second part on how to create custom brushes for Blender. In case you miss it, please consider watching part 1 in which I cover how to make or set up alpha brushes in 4 different ways to quickly add details to your models. In this video, we will learn what is a VDM, functionality and usage, the differences between these ones and alphas, where to get the VDM brushes, how to set your VDM, how to make it with a native Blender add-on, and finally, how to make a VDM from an existing mesh. In the description, you will find the timestamps in case you want to skip to a specific part of this video. With this out of the way, let's get to work. VDM brushes are a more advanced form of sculpting brushes that allow for the sculpting of detailed three-dimensional shapes directly onto the mesh surface. Unlike alpha brushes, VDM brushes sculpt geometry, not just height or displacement information. VDM brushes use images or maps similar to alpha brushes, but instead of simply displacing the surface, they actually modify the underlying geometry of the mesh, allowing for the creation of complex shapes and forms. VDM brushes are especially useful for sculpting intricate details that require more depth and complexity, such as adding horns, spikes, bolts, or other geometry elements to a model. The primary difference between alpha brushes and VDM brushes lies in how they affect the geometry of the model. Alpha brushes modify surface height or displacement based on grayscale values, while VDM brushes directly sculpt new geometry onto the mesh. VDM brushes offer greater complexity and versatility in detailing, allowing for the creation of more intricate three-dimensional shapes compared to alpha brushes, which are limited to surface textures. VDM brushes may require more system resources since they involve modifying the geometry of the mesh, while alpha brushes are typically less resource intensive since they mainly affect surface displacement. Both types of brushes are valuable tools in a 3D artist toolkit, and the choice between them depends on the specific requirements of the project and the desired level of detail. Having an understanding of what they are, let's check where we can get them. The first place we're going to check is the Blender market. In here, you will find a variety of VDMs for quickly adding skin details or for clothing, ornamental, wounds, etc. There are not many for free, but you will be able to find some like this human face VDM, but they normally are for non-commercial purposes, and they will require the purchase of a license that in most cases will include a larger set of brushes. A personal favorite of mine is this one right here. This is a pack with over 600 brushes. What I did was to get the free demo to test them before getting them. As you can see, the selection is just amazing with brushes for creatures, stitches, rocks, etc. The next place will be Gumroad. And for VDMs, I normally don't come here, and the reason is that you will find more VDM brushes for ZBrush than anything else. The map for ZBrush works differently than the one in Blender, and even though we can make the map work, it is a more tedious process and will require you to have a ZBrush, so I will not cover that in this video. In the description, you will find the link to this demo pack by the artist David P that we will be using for this video. The pack is not for commercial usage, so please bear this in mind when you use them, or consider to buy the whole pack with the license if you want to sell your work. For now, just download the free demo if you want to follow along. Let's set up our VDM brush. I'm using Blender 4.0 just to let you know. The first thing I want to do is to have an object to test my brush on. So by pressing Shift A, I can add a UV sphere. I will then add a multi-res modifier and add some subdivisions. When working with VDMs, your object should be very dense, but using a multi-res modifier is the best option as we can increase or decrease the level of subdivisions if needed. Let's move to sculpt mode. Unlike the alpha brushes, the VDMs come with their settings and adjustments already configured when you get a pack, making it easier and quicker to have them set up and ready to use. To use a VDM, we will go to File and click on Append. Then navigate to where you have your pack of brushes, then you should look for the .blend file that comes with it. Double-click the file and open the brush folder. Once in the folder, find the brushes and select them and click on Append. To use your appended brushes, first pick the drop brush since the VDMs will always be stored in this one. Go to the Tools section and click on the image so we can do a search and pick the VDM and test it. If the quality is not the best, you can always increase the subdivisions in the modifier. Let's try a different one. As you can see, setting up a VDM is fairly easy. If you have seen my other videos, you know I use a lot my Sculpt Wheel Addon, and the good thing is that this one can store the VDMs and alphas that I use the most for quick access. I will leave the link in the description in case you want to get it. And this is how you set up your VDMs from a file. Let's now learn how to make your own. For this, we will be using a Blender add-on. So let's go to Edit, Preferences, Add-ons, and just type VDM in the search field. Then check the box for the VDM Brush Baker add-on with the most recent update. Once you install the add-on, remember to save it if this is not done automatically. You will find the add-on in the End panel with the N key under the Tool tab. The first thing we need is a plane with a multi-res modifier with a good level of subdivisions, and this is done by the add-on when we click on Create a Sculpting Plane. Now we have our plane, and as you can see, it has a multi-res modifier set, but I will increase the subdivisions as I would like to have more quality for sculpting. I will go to Sculpt mode and hit N to hide the End panel. When making VDMs, it is important not to mess with the edges of the plane, so what I like to do is to go to the Mask tab and hit on Fill Mask. From there, I will look for the mask brush in the tool panel or press the keyboard shortcut M. In my case, I normally use the Sculpt Wheel add-on. With my mask brush selected, I will hold Ctrl and start to unmask the area in which I will be sculpting. With the snake hook, I will pull the center like this. With this simple shape, the idea is to have an overhang so you can see the difference between an alpha and a VDM, since the alpha would not be able to handle this. I'm not using any symmetry here or making anything complex since this is not the intention of this tutorial, so I will time-lapse the rest of the sculpting process. To add some extra details, I use some of the VDMs I already have. To have the top a bit more pointy, I changed the fall off of the grab brush from smooth to sharp. At this point, I can remove the mask with Alt-M. The next step is to navigate to the tool panel and scroll until you find your VDM Brush Baker add-on. From here, I could just hit the render and create button, but first I would like to give it a name. You can also increase the map resolution, but I will leave it as it is and hit render. Once the render is done, the tool will automatically choose the drop brush and will load the basic adjustments for your VDM to work right away. So now we can test it. And just like that, we have created a brush that will help us to quickly add details to our models. Having learned how to create VDM brushes with the add-on, let's now learn how to make VDM from an existing object or mesh. For this part of the tutorial, there are some things that I would like to add. After searching and watching all the videos, this is the process I found that works the best. I learned it from this YouTuber, so I will leave you the link in the description in case you want to watch his video as well. In his video, he shows how to deal with the brush when this one is losing resolution, and I will not be covering that part. The next thing to add is that this process is a bit tedious, but after you learn the steps, you will end up making the brushes quickly. I did a few iterations first until I found what I feel it works best. To make this work, you will need to download the VDM demo file found in the Blender website. You will find the link in the description. We need this as this has the texture required to create the map. The last thing is that you don't want to push too much by trying to make brushes out of a too complex object, because believe me, you will have a hard time trying to stretch the UVs to make it work. So try to keep it simple until Blender provides us with a more streamlined way to do this. Okay, so let's begin. For this part of the video, I went ahead and modeled a stylized ear that I want to use to create my brush. Down here, you will have the keys I press, but I will try to call them out loud so you can focus more on what I'm doing. The first thing I do is to press Shift C to bring the cursor to the center of the world. Now with Shift A, I can add a plane. This will always be required when you are creating a VDM brush similar to what we did before. The next thing I will do is to position the ear, so I will go to the top orthographic view, pressing the tilde key to get this pie menu. You can also press 7 in the numpad. Now from the top, I will rotate the ear pressing R, then Z to constrain the rotation to the Z axis, then type 90, but I want it to the other side, so press minus and left click to confirm. I will now proceed to rotate with R, but now along the x-axis 90 degrees and press minus. Back to the top, I need to scale my ear, making sure that it is within the bounds of the plane. While I was doing my iterations, I realized that you don't want your object to be too big. The reason for this is that when you are ready to use the VDM with the anchor stroke, you will need to pull a lot the ear to make it visible due to the size of the object in the VDM. To continue, I will first subdivide the ear with Ctrl 1. Having my subdivision, I can press Ctrl A and click on Visual Geometry to Mesh to apply the modifier. Let's now scale the object with S. From the side view, I will position my object. First, I will bring it up a bit, pressing G and Z to constrain the movement to the axis. The ear should be at an angle, having the left side stick to the face. To replicate that, I will come to the front view and I will rotate it on the Y-axis and then bring it down pressing G and then Z. Again, this makes the difference between alphas and VDMs. As you can see, I have this overhang that the VDM will be able to mimic, but this is something that cannot be achieved using alphas. With my object selected, I will press Ctrl A and apply all the transformations. Next, we select the plane and hit Tab to go to edit mode. Now I press A to select the whole plane, and pressing E followed by Z, I can extrude the plane to give it some thickness. If you notice, my plane is a bit darker on the top. This is due to the face orientation not being correct. To verify this, we can go to the overlays and check the face orientation box. And as you can see, the object turns red to indicate that the orientation is wrong. To fix it, we press A to select the whole object, then press Shift-N to recalculate the normals. And as you can see, the color changed, and this is what we are looking for. I turn off the face orientation and go back to object mode. Now I need to combine the objects, so having the plane selected, I hold Shift and click on the ear, and with Ctrl J, I join them together. With Tab, I go to Sculpt mode. In case you wonder, I'm using the Machine Tools add-ons to have this pie menu. To fully combine the objects, I need to remesh, but there are some settings to adjust. I just need to preserve the volume and fix poles. We can change the voxel size in here, but I like to do it visually, pressing R, then I drag the mouse until I feel I have enough resolution. Then I do a left click to confirm and Ctrl R to apply the remesh. If you notice, I have lost a lot of detail and this is not what I want, so I will go back with Ctrl Z and then remesh again at a higher resolution. This is good. I have all my details. Next thing I will do is to soften the transitions holding Shift. Remember to use a mask if you want to protect the edges of the plane, but in this case I don't need it. Having my objects combined with a good transition, I can go to Edit mode. You can also get to Edit mode pressing here. Now we need to trim our plane by removing some of the faces and leave some close to the ear. And we do this because if we leave it as it is, you will have some nasty borders showing in your VDM brush. In face selection mode, I will select a loop with Shift-Alt and clicking on the face. For you, this might be just Alt and click, but I have another add-on that uses that for something else. With the loop selected, I can come from the top and press Ctrl+ to increase the selection. I want to increase it enough to be close to the ear but not touching it. Then I can press X and click on Delete Faces. To remove these faces at the bottom, I will position the cursor on top and press L to select them, then X, Delete Faces. For this to work, we need to unwrap the object, but first we need to protect the borders, and we do this by pressing N to open the M panel, and then I go to Item. Now you hit 2 to get the edge selection mode, but I will use my add-on for this. Then I switch to Top View. Select the whole edge and we are going to extend it by 1. To do this first, I look at the gizmo to check which direction the edge needs to be extended to. In this case, it's the positive X, so in the Item tab, I will click on X and change the value to +1. Click outside to deselect and proceed to select the edge at the bottom of the plane. When I check the gizmo, I can see that this is -Y, so in the Y field, I will type -1. Move to the next edge and this is now -X, so in the X field, I will type -1. Then I do the same with the top edge, with +Y and increase by 1. With our edges extended, we can now go to the UV editing so we can get the object unwrapped. In face mode, I will select all the faces we extended before. Move to the top view, pressing 7 in the numpad. Now press U to get the unwrap menu. You also have it at the top, but it is always better to learn the shortcuts. So pressing U, I then click on Project from View Bounce. As you can see, we have our protection border. To continue from here, we have to make sure that we do not unwrap this part again. To do this, within the UV editing area, you can press P to pin the UVs, or you can do it from the UV menu at the top. When this is done, you will notice that the color of the UV is a bit different. Having the borders pinned, we go back to the editing window and press A to select the whole object, then press U and do a normal unwrap. Now we have the whole mesh unwrapped and the borders remain in the right position. Moving back to the layout, we need now to add a special material that allows to have the mesh turn into a VDM. This material, you will find it in the Blender demo file that I mentioned before. With your Blender file ready, go to File, then Append, and navigate to where you have your .blend file and click on it. Then go to Material and click on VDM Baking Material to append it. Now I can select the object and in the Material menu, click in the drop-down menu and select the appended material. If I go now to the Viewport Shading, I can see my material apply, and this shows me with colors which areas are going to be shown as part of my VDM, and in black, which is absence of color, what will not be displayed. Navigate to the shading area, and in here we can see the node setup that comes as part of the material that we added to the object. You have your image texture node, but I always like to create my own. With Shift A, then in the search box I type image texture. Hit New and give it a name. The resolution I like is 4K, so I click on the field and drag the mouse to the one below it while holding so I can change both values at once, and type 4096. I do not need alpha, but we'll check the 32-bit float and click OK. Next, we go into the render menu and make sure that the render engine is in cycles so we can bake the texture. Scroll down to your max samples, and in this case we only need one. Scroll down to the bake menu, and in the bake type search for emit. Before hitting bake, make sure that your object and the image texture node are selected, then you can click on bake. With the baking completed, you will see the texture on the left side, so the next step, which is very important, is to save this texture. So back in the UV editing, click in the drop down and search for your texture. When you do this, you will notice that the image tab has an asterisk, and this is to let us know that the texture has not been saved. So we click on it, then save as, and in here you can see some of the iterations I did before making this video. Save your file as OpenEXR, RGBA, and full float. Back in layout, we have our VDM created, but we need to do some adjustments. I hide the object and will create a UV sphere with a multi-res modifier to have a mesh for testing my brush. VDMs requires to have a highly subdivided object to work, so with the multi-res I can increase or decrease this according to the level of quality I'm seeking for. In sculpt mode, select the draw brush and go to the tool menu. The first thing to do is to duplicate your draw brush so you don't mess with it. Then rename it. Scroll down to your texture, then click New, then click here, Open, and navigate to where you have your texture. Back to Tool, we go to Mapping and change it to Area Plane. Check the Vector Displacement box. Now change your stroke to anchor. This will allow us to click and pull to make our VDM element appear over the mesh. And the last thing is to change the fall off to constant so we can get all of our details as expected. Let's go ahead and test this. Now it looks too soft, and to correct this we can increase the strength. You can do this with Shift F. If you notice that the quality is not the best, you can always increase the subdivisions in the modifier. As we can see, this is working great, and if we look into this area, we can see the overhang, which is something that the alpha brushes cannot handle. And this is how you make a VDM brush from an existing mesh. And that's it guys for this video. If you enjoyed the content, please consider to like, share and subscribe. And if you have any suggestions to improve the channel, please let me know down below in the comment section. Thank you for watching and see you soon.